Paris, 1858. In a private box above the opera, with the music still playing, a young American named Paul Morphy sat down to play. Across the board, two noblemen, a German duke and a French count, sharing the pieces against him as a team. If a quiet game like this is how you'd like to fall asleep, take a moment to subscribe. There's a new one each week. And here is the lovely part. The game was played at the Opera House during a performance. The two noblemen had invited Morphy to share their private box. Below them, the singers sang, and the music drifted up from the stage. Morphy, it said, would rather have watched the opera, so he played quickly and beautifully to be done. This was the romantic age of chess, when players prized a beautiful attack over a safe little point. Now, close your eyes and let the board take shape in the dark. White moves first. Morphy pushes his king's pawn 2 squares to e4. The oldest, friendliest first move there is, a door opening in the center. Black answers in kind. The pawn comes to e5. 2 pawns, face to face in the middle of the board, neither able to take the other. The best reply, and the most natural, a mirror. Now white brings out a knight from g1 to f3. It steps toward the center and leans on the black pawn at e5. A quiet little threat. Develop a piece and ask a question at the same time. Black does not defend that pawn the usual way. Instead, the pawn comes forward to d6. It props up the e5 pawn from the side, solid, a touch passive. This is an old, careful opening. They called it the Philidor. Safe enough, but it can leave the black pieces feeling a little cramped. Morphy strikes at the center. The d pawn marches to d4. Now there is real tension. White's d4 pawn glares at black's e5. The center is alive. Something will have to give. And here the noblemen make their first telling choice. Black brings the light bishop out from c8 all the way to g4. It pins itself against white's knight on f3. See what it does. The bishop, the knight, and behind the knight, the white queen on d1. The bishop stares down that line, leaning on the knight that guards the center. It feels active, but it is the bishop, not a pawn, doing this work. And Morphy is about to show why that matters. White takes. The d4 pawn captures on e5. A small shock in the center. The pawns begin to clear. Now black has a choice. Take back the pawn or follow through with the bishop. If black recaptures the pawn first, the knight on f3 is pinned and the e5 pawn is loose. There are little tricks hiding in the position, and the noblemen feel one of them. So the bishop takes the knight on f3. A trade. The black bishop, which had been pinning, captures the white knight outright. And now white must take back, or be a piece down. The queen swings down from d1 and recaptures on f3. This is the best move, and it is a happy one for white. Look what has quietly happened. Black has given up his good light bishop. White still has both of his. And the white queen now sits on f3, out early, but pointing at tender squares. She eyes the long diagonal, and she eyes the weak square f7 by the black king. Now black takes the pawn back. The d6 pawn captures on e5. Material is level again. The center has emptied out. Let's pause and picture the whole board as it stands. Both kings still sit at home in the center, uncastled. In the middle, a single black pawn on e5 and a white pawn on e4, facing off. White's queen rests on f3, alert, eyeing that soft f7 square. Black has a knight and bishops still asleep at home. He has traded away his best attacker. Morphy is a step ahead in time, and in this game time is everything. Now white develops with purpose. The king's bishop slides out to c4. It takes aim along the diagonal, straight at f7. Feel that. The bishop on c4 and the queen on f3, both pointing at the same tender square. f7, the pawn in front of the black king, guarded only by the king himself. Two pieces leaning on one weak point. This is how Morphy builds a storm from quiet moves. Black must answer the pressure and bring a piece to the defense. The knight comes out from g8 to f6. It develops and it guards. It blocks the long diagonal and watches the king. But notice, it does nothing yet to free the rest of Black's sleeping army. Now Morphy makes a sharp, clever little move. The queen shifts to b3. The best move on the board. Watch where she points now. From b3, the queen and the bishop on c4 both bear down on f7 again. From a new angle, around the side of the knight that tried to block them. And there is a second threat hiding underneath. The queen on b3 also looks far down the board at the pawn on b7 and the rook behind it. Two threats at once from one calm move. This is the art of it. The noblemen must find a defense to both, and there is only one. Black plays the queen to e7. The best try. The queen steps in front of her king and guards f7 herself. Now if white were to grab the f7 pawn, the queens would simply come off, and the storm would pass. But see the cost of that defense. The black queen now sits on e7, blocking in her own bishop on f8. Black's king side is jammed. The pieces trip over one another at home. One side glides, the other is tangled. That is the whole story so far. Morphy does not rush to win the little pawn on b7. He keeps building. The queen's knight comes out from b1 to c3. Another piece into the fight, pointing at the center and the king side. He could have taken the b7 pawn for a small profit. But that would let the black rook swing free and waste the lead he has so carefully built. Morphy wants the attack, not the pawn. Pieces first, always. Black plays a small, sensible pawn move. The c-pawn comes to c6. It builds a little wall. It takes the day-5 square away from white's pieces. And it gives the black queen an escape route, a breathing hole at c7. A careful human move. The best move, even. But careful is not enough here. Let's stop and picture the board one more time before the music swells. White is poised and open. The bishop commands c4. The queen sits high on b3. A knight stands on c3. A pawn holds e4. And the king waits, ready to castle to safety. Black is knotted. The king on e8, the queen crowded onto e7 before it. The dark bishop and the rook in the corner have not yet drawn a breath. Every white piece points toward the black king. Almost every black piece is still asleep. The board is leaning, like a held breath, toward Morphy. And from this calm, tilted stillness, the most famous attack in chess is about to begin. It is white to move, and the air is about to change. The black king still stands on e8, in the middle, where it began. It never found a safe corner to hide in. Its own bishop waits on f8, Its own pawn sits on f7. They crowd around the king like furniture in a small room. Black's queen rests on e7. A knight watches from f6. The other knight has not yet moved, asleep on b8. White is poised. The light bishop on c4 stares down at f7. The queen leans out on b3. A knight stands ready on c3. And White's king is still at home on e1. Everything is in place. Now the story moves. White plays the bishop from c1 to g5. It slides quietly into the long diagonal. And with that, the black knight on f6 is pinned. It cannot move. Behind it sits the queen on e7. If the knight steps aside, the queen falls. So one of black's defenders is quietly nailed down. This is the best move on the board, and it asks nothing loudly. It simply tightens the net. Black, feeling the pressure, reaches for space. The pawn goes from b7 to b5. It pokes at the bishop on c4, hoping to push it away. A reasonable thought. Win a moment, gain some air. But Morphy does not retreat. Here the game turns and the giving begins. White takes the pawn on b5 with the knight from c3. The knight, worth so much, plants itself in the open. It can be captured. Morphy offers it anyway. Why? Because the lines toward the black king are opening. Every trade peels away another wall. Black accepts. The c6 pawn takes on b5. Now the file is bare, and the bishop is waiting. White plays bishop from c4 to b5, with check. The bishop slices in along the diagonal to the king. Black must answer the check at once. The sleeping knight finally wakes, b8 to d7. It throws itself in front of the king, blocking the line. This is the only good way to meet it. But look closely at that knight on d7. It is pinned to the king by the bishop on b5. It cannot move. It can only stand and be leaned upon. And remember the other knight on f6, also pinned. Two black knights, both frozen in place. Now White does something unhurried and deadly. The king castles long to the queen side. The king tucks towards c1, and the rook swings to d1. That rook now glares straight down the d-file. And what sits on the d-file? The pinned knight on d7. It is attacked, and it cannot run. This quiet castling move is the best in the position. It develops, it shelters the king, and it attacks, all at once. Let us pause and feel the whole board now. White's king is snug at c1. The dark bishop holds g5. The light bishop holds b5, pinning from the side. The rook bears down the d-file. The queen waits on b3. Two white pieces and a rook all point at the same trembling knight. Black is a piece ahead in material and utterly tied up. The king on e8 cannot breathe. Black tries to prop up the pinned knight. The rook comes from 8 to d8. Now it guards the knight on d7 from behind. Defender added to defender. Surely that holds. And here Morphy plays the move that takes your breath. The rook on d1 captures on d7. A rook, given for a knight, smashing into the pin. He gives up more material to keep the pressure unbroken. Black recaptures, rook from d8 takes on d7. The defenders are being traded down. one by one. Now only that single rook stands between the king and ruin. White brings the last rook from h1 to d1. Again the d-file. Again the pin on the rook at d7. It is the same idea played twice like a slow drum beat. Black tries to defend once more. The queen steps from e7 to e6. She moves to guard and to add a defender to the pinned rook. It is the best try, but the doors are already closing. White takes again, bishop from b5 captures on d7 with check. Another defender stripped away, and the king is touched once more. Black answers. The knight from f6 captures on the 7. Now feel the board just before the end. The black king still on e8, hemmed by f7, and the bishop on f8. A lone knight sits on d7, the other knight still on b8. The queen, far off on e6, can do nothing in time. White has a queen on b3, a rook on the 1, a bishop on g5. And that bishop quietly rules the dark squares to d8. Hold that picture. Now comes the jewel of the game. White plays the queen from b3 to b8 with check. The queen, the greatest piece, offered into the corner. She lands beside the knight on b8 and says, "Take me." It looks like madness. It is the deepest clarity. For black has no choice. The knight on b8 must capture the queen. Nothing else answers the check. And by capturing that knight steps off the d-file forever. The last guardian of d8 is lured away. The knight from b8 takes the queen. It is forced. And now, softly, the final blow. The rook comes from d1 to d8. Checkmate. Let us see why the king cannot escape. The rook on d8 checks along the 8th rank. The king cannot take it, for the bishop on g5 guards d8. The king cannot flee to e7. The same bishop covers that square. It cannot go to f7. Its own pawn stands there. It cannot reach f8. Its own bishop blocks the way. Nothing can step in front. Nothing can capture. The king is held by his own loyal pieces, and there is no door. A rook and a bishop, working as one, end it. Morphy gave a knight, then a rook, then his queen. Each gift removed a single defender, and not one move was wasted. That is why this little game is remembered after all these years. Played in a theatre box between the acts of an opera. Quiet, exact, and complete. The board is still now. The pieces have come to rest. There is nothing left to defend, and nothing left to fear. The game is finished. Let it rest. And let yourself rest too. And there the game rests. The last move is made, and nothing more needs to happen. Let the board begin to soften now. The squares loosen, light and dark blurring into one quiet grey. The pieces lean where they stood, and one by one they lose their edges. The kings, the rooks, the patient pawns, all dissolving slowly into the dark. There is nothing left to defend, no square left to watch. The work is done. You can let the board go. It will keep exactly as it was until you want it again. Let your thoughts drift the way the pieces did, edges softening, fading out. No move to find, nowhere to be. Just the warm dark and your slow, easy breath. Rest now. You've followed it all the way home. Sleep well. Good night.